The prisoner wishes to say a word.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Service of Change's Changecast. I'm your host, Dennis Nappy II, with Service of Change, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. We're going to have a great show for you this evening. I'm here again with my new co-host, Joel Schaefer, and we're going to be bringing on Lori Latimer. We're going to have a discussion tonight about the mental health stigma. Lori has a lot of experience in that field and is going to bring a lot of good things for us to listen to and to talk about. If you know somebody that's ever been dealing with some mental health issues, this is definitely an episode that you want to pay attention to. So, Joel, how you doing tonight, bud?
Oh, never better. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be continuing on this journey of podcasting and this journey of trying to make small changes and help others make small change. So I'm very excited to be here and very excited to do this.
I got to tell you, man, after we released, after we finished recording our podcast last week up until the release of it, I've been on some crazy high, just excited about what we've been working on and what we've been doing. I've been putting the website together and writing up the article for it and sending information back and forth with you. It's been so exciting, don't you think?
Yeah, and like we had kind of like alluded to in some of our conversations about like the synchronicity of the universe. Like I just felt like that this has some kind of benevolent force behind it, so to speak. Some good energy and good vibes are motivating our endeavor here, and I feel good about that.
I feel it too, and I got to say, it's about freaking time, man, because that negative energy has been rearing its ugly head in my life quite a bit over the past couple of years, so it's nice to see this coming through for us, definitely. So we're gonna have a discussion with Miss Lori Latimer tonight, and I'm gonna go through her bio real quick. Let me just pull it up on my screen. And Lori has an MSW and an LSW, and I'm going to guess that it's a master's in social work and she's a licensed social worker. She grew up in Philadelphia and Upper Darby with a Bachelor of the Arts in Comparative Literature, a minor in African American Studies from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. She got her MSW from University of Pennsylvania, professional experience in housing and homelessness, trauma-informed care and mental health, currently working in geriatrics. She loves seeing the parallels between hard lessons learned on the mat during martial arts training and our personal and professional lives. And on a personal note, I mean, that's quite an impressive bio that Lori brings to the table. I've known Lori, 20 years now. We grew up together. She's more of a sister to me than a friend, and a very caring person, very talented person, and also a very talented poet. And we're going to get into a little bit of Lori's haikus. For those of you that follow us on Twitter and on the website and on Instagram, Lori Latimer is the one that's been contributing every Tuesday her Haikus Days of Change, where she gives her 575 with some inspirational poetry to try and get everybody motivated to get up and make that difference each and every day. We're going to talk a little bit about her haikus also in this change cast. So let me stop running my mouth here. I know Lori's just excited to come on the show, and let me bring her on. So Lori Latimer, welcome to the show. How are you this evening?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be talking with you guys tonight. This is awesome.
We've been talking about this all week, getting excited to get you on here and stuff. Quite an awesome background that you have, that I know because I've known you for so long now and watched you go through this journey. But for those that are out there listening, tell us about it. Tell us about, what life is like as a social worker. Tell us about your journey.
Well, it took me a long time to get where I am now. I think, like some people, I didn't have a lot of models growing up of people that had specific career paths. Like both my parents are super smart, intelligent people, but they, always had jobs, 40, 50 hours a week, to support the family. And which is, honorable and respectable. But, growing up, I knew, I had all these things that I was concerned about and passionate about. And growing up in Philadelphia, you see a lot of disparity. Just even, you see disparity in all the different parts of the city. There's just, not everyone grows up. That idea of an even playing field, I think, is a myth. It really depends on what neighborhood you grew up in, what your school was like, the education that your parents have. And, Philadelphia, a lot of people are pretty hard up. And so as I moved around in the world, I just saw how much, good resources can affect where you go in life. And I didn't really know how to put that desire to kind of level the playing field into a career until I lived in Athens, Georgia for a while, and I became a program admin for a housing program which helped low-income homeowners get free repairs to their homes. And I was working with older people, in their 70s and 80s that had nothing in the world but their homes. And my labor force was entirely volunteer. So seeing how a community could come together to help others within that community, really changed my life. And that put me on the path to go back and get my master's and do what I'm doing now.
Lori, that's fantastic, and I like the common theme running through that, I think, was community, and the importance of that community, how it can have the power to make that difference in your life, or to really make your life very difficult and a hardship. Would you agree with me on that, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that keys into she mentioned disparity, and I'm taking some notes here, like disparity and resources and the myth of a level playing field. And I think that me and you talked about that in our last podcast about how, like you as a teacher and as me as somebody who was, in various forms was trying to help people who had mental health issues and or addiction. We were trying to empower people. And we weren't necessarily able to give them the same resources maybe we had. And so just like what Lori was talking about just is having me brainstorm like more questions and more things to explore as, me and you go forward in terms of like how do we empower people? To what extent can we change the way resources are distributed in our society, or do we have to just accept that they're unevenly distributed and then do what Lori did, which is you get volunteers to come help you. Like there's vast human resources out there, people who want to help other people, but it's just getting them together and getting them, having the leadership and the organizational skills to put them into action, which is something I want to explore. And I think, not to keep rambling too long, but that's something that in terms of future guests, I want to have other people and community leaders and people who have programs and try to coordinate and work with other people so we can be a connecting force between different groups of people.
We're so on the same page, dude.
Yeah.
We're so on the same page. Yep. Go ahead, Lori. I thought you were going to say something.
I was going to say, the thing about communities that are struggling is that it's so important to capitalize on the strengths and the leaders that are already there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because, there's so many parts of the city and other areas that are struggling where, you go in, you bring the college kids in and, you bring in all these programs that are outside. And that's fine, and that can help. But, if you're going to really help a community believe in itself, you have to pull the success stories that are already there, and really see, like, there are role models already in your community. you know.
That's like the stigma, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. I know I'm not saying it word for word, but that's the truth right there. You want to empower the people that are already there, and Joel and I talked about this last week, let them highlight their strengths, because when you leave, which you're ultimately going to, because it's, even though it may be your passion, it's still your job, and it takes you into different directions. They need to be there to still give back and work with their communities, and they have that sense of pride, and they're more invested in it to help their own communities, and that's what we want to see, is highlighting the natural raw talent that we have there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and there can be implicit dangers to outside forces coming to a community that's disadvantaged, and there's a power differential there. And I'm very aware of that, and that's why when me and you, Dennis, were talking about how you were dealing with, you're a white guy from the suburbs, you're dealing with some black kids from Southwest Philly, and you guys might have more in common than some people would think, but there's also huge value differences. And what I had said to you was that in a lot of ways you weren't necessarily trying to impose this outside idea. I mean, to the extent that you don't want somebody to go to jail or hurt another human being, I think we can all agree that that's a value we can share.
Right.
But how you get to there and the other ways that you go about it, there's different subtle mores and value systems that are at play. And often well-meaning people will come in and they'll try to impose their value systems onto a community, and then they get caught up in that resistance, which the resistance is valid and legitimate sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Really good point there. Let's move on. I know we wanted to, because we could go on this all night. I think anything we talk about, we could definitely go on about all night with these social issues, because they're so important. But I really do want to talk about the mental health stigma. It's something that's very personal to me in a lot of my experiences, both personally and professionally. I know Joel has, a lot of experience in that field as well. So Lori, why don't you tell us how you got, involved in that area, or why you have such an interest in that topic?
Sure. So in the course of my social work career, I've been working with people, men and women from 18 up to their 80s, and everyone at some point has coped with some kind of mental health issue, whether it's lifelong and they realize it as an adult, or it's episodic. And people feel, what I found in common is that people feel so much shame. And as I'm working with all these different people, it's like, they're ashamed, they think they're the only one, but I keep hearing these common stories. And I know even from my own life, my mother had very serious mental health issues. She had borderline personality disorder, lifelong battle with depression and anxiety, and, she committed suicide in 2006. I've had my own problems with anxiety, and I think the thing is that, mental health, it's our foundation of how we operate in the world. I mean, we all have to figure out, how we can deal with our emotions. And the thing is, we all experience these really hard, difficult things in our lives, like losses, which could be the loss of a person, the loss of your job, the loss of your sense of safety. You could be in a serious, accident or have a life-threatening illness, and then all of a sudden your life has changed. And, these are common experiences that we have, but our culture doesn't treat them as common. You become a victim for a little bit, and maybe people want to rescue you, or maybe people tell you to shut up and quit whining, and you're supposed to go on with your life. And I think this is what can make us so sick as a community, when, we keep, not just even, things like depression and anxiety and even grief, but if you have something more complex like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, keeping all these things quiet doesn't help us as a community. That keeps us separate, and it keeps, those individuals that really have problems from ever having a chance of finding any kind of contentment. So that's why, having more open conversations about what we all go through, I think, is so important.
And Lori, like listening to you, I mean, this is exactly what I was when I heard that the topic was going to be about mental health stigma. These were like very, very similar to what you were thinking. Is like the first thing you said just now was that it almost sounded like to me that having mental health issues at some point in one's experience of living is more the rule rather than the exception. But as a society, we look at it the other way. We tend to look at it as being the exception, that everybody's coping really well, and that's the rule. When the reality, in my experience, is that it's, with the exception of some serious stuff like schizophrenia, which is a brain disease, many of our mental health, what are called mental health disorders, are just a lack of coping skills. And so what will separate somebody who has a mental health disorder and someone who doesn't, and they have the same experience, is the presence of coping skills. So if somebody doesn't have a set of coping skills, they can become, or if the event that they go through or the series of events that a person goes through is so overwhelming and so traumatic, they could be a resilient person before that experience occurred. And then suddenly it's so overwhelming that suddenly they become what gets called a mentally ill person, because the experience was so traumatic that it overwhelmed the set of coping skills that they have.
Joel, that's a great point. I got to interject right here. We're coming up on our break, so we're going to continue this conversation talking about the mental health stigma and how it affects pretty much everybody in society right when we come back after this.
I challenge you to try to teach them. Encourage them and listen to them. Listen to their stories of home with drunken mothers, jailed fathers, and bullet-filled brothers. And once you have become a part of them, once you have given yourself to them, then I challenge you to come up with a plan to help them. I was trying to prove something that I was told didn't exist. The threat was out there, and I needed to find it. We heard screaming coming from the inside. My smile disappeared immediately, and I pounded hard on the door. Nobody answered, but the screaming continued. It's interesting to note, however, that regardless of how well your class is behaving and how well trained you think you have your students, your carefully constructed order and structure that you have worked so hard to build can be destroyed in a moment. Hi, I'm Dennis Nappy II, author of Service, A Soldier's Journey, Counterintelligence, Law Enforcement, and the Violence of Urban Education. What you just heard were quotes from my story. If you'd like to hear more, you can find my book at serviceofchange.com, at amazon.com, and wherever books are sold. Thank you.
And welcome back to Service of Change's Changecast, the podcast for change. I'm Dennis Nappy II. I'm here with my co-host Joel, and Lori Latimer is our guest tonight. We're talking about the mental health stigma. Before we jump back into that really interesting conversation that we were having, just want to direct you on ways you can reach out to us and be a part of the show. You can go to www.serviceofchange.com. That's www.serviceofchange.com, where we have several really great, interesting articles written by various writers. Lori has written articles for us, Joel, myself, things you really want to know about if you want to make a difference and change the world. We have Thoughts for Change that appear every single day, some of them inspired by Lori Latimer's own haikus, a little 575 to give you some inspiration and motivation. They come up every single morning through Twitter, through Instagram, through our Facebook feeds, and they're also running through our Service of Change page. Obviously, we have our Changecast. If you'd like to be a guest on our Changecast, please email us. You can email us at serviceofchange.com. You can reach out to Joel at serviceofchange.com, or me, dnappy2 at serviceofchange.com. And my last plug, please follow me on Twitter, Dennis Nappy II. That's Nappii. We want to hear from you. We want to be in touch with you. We want to spread the word. And as Joel's always saying, we want to build that sense of community. We have a platform for it. Please reach out to us. All right, stepping off my soapbox now and jumping back into this conversation and talking with Lori, who was talking about her history with, dealing with mental health as a professional, and in her own personal life. She mentioned that her mother faced some severe mental health challenges throughout life, and the conversation was discussing how everybody deals with mental health and anxiety, and as Joel said, it's just some people don't have as strong of coping skills, and if I could, just to sum up from my experience, I completely agree, and I found what frustrates me talking about the stigma, and I've seen this, several times is somebody feels bad enough that they have to have themselves committed, whether it's 302'd or it's they're volunteering themselves to go in, and I've seen such poor treatment of these people, and I have to stress, it's not a choice. If somebody is so depressed that they want to end their lives, they're not choosing to feel that way. They can't just snap out of it. They have something affecting their brain, and that is their only resource, their only escape that's left. So let me pass the mic back over to Lori, and she can talk a little bit on that.
Sure. I mean, I think, if you've ever experienced, a mental health crisis or seen someone you love go through something like that, you learn that it's not voluntarily. No one wants to feel that low and that worthless and that terrified all the time. And, for some people, when you experience a trauma, your brain chemistry does change. And for a lot of people, certain, traumatic brain injury, things like that, that changes the way that you're processing everything around you.
Lori, I didn't mean to interrupt, but could you give us a without breaking confidentiality? I don't even have to tell you that, but could you give us maybe a personal account, maybe some like a case that you've dealt with of somebody that's really faced that exact scenario or a similar scenario to that, and how it affected you?
Sure. I mean, I can say, with some of the people that I've worked with, they've had extreme trauma, abuse, and neglect in childhood. Like, all of it. Like, been in the foster care system, sexually abused, beaten up by their peers, loss of a, significant caregiver. And then as children, maybe, they develop some adaptive coping mechanisms, like maybe, they can kind of disassociate when things get really bad, which they have to do to survive. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have angry outbursts, which they have to do to, make it look like they're not a punk, in their community. But then these behaviors that seem adaptive as children, they become maladaptive as adults. And
they become inappropriate and as they grow older. Yeah.
Right. And so for some people, maybe they, I've seen people where, PTSD and depression and, bipolar disorder and schizophrenia all look the same to their doctors. So they're being told different things. They're being given different diagnoses, different, medications, and maybe not great therapy and not great day-to-day coping skills. They have no one to talk to about this stuff. It's very institutionalized, their treatment. And, I've seen people, be suicidal, and have to basically, sometimes when you get 302'd or you go involuntarily under a 201, that sometimes for people that's their chance to start over. That kind of like I'm done here, and someone steps in. If there's at least one person that really cares about you, you have a chance to get back on track. But it takes a lot of work to get there, because I think, mental health treatment isn't that great.
No, it's not.
You're right.
It's not. If I could just jump in, because you were talking about so many things that like I experienced like directly, and like the angry outbursts in order to fit in with the peers, or to, in my case, to defend myself against the peers. Like I went through that, and being beat up by my peers, and carrying a lot of those maladaptive coping strategies into adulthood. And like what was interesting, what you were talking about, is that some of these strategies were so subtly interwoven into my daily habits and interactions, and they would just flare up infrequently, that I didn't even know I had a problem necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so I would feel anxiety and shame and anger and all these feelings that I didn't think, I thought I was like maybe 30, like I'm 37 now. So say when I was 30, I had this happening. I'm a 30-year-old adult. I should know how to handle this. So I would just try to control it by myself and not try to go get help, because I thought that just control, like this is what I was being told by my society, like control your anger. Like don't act that way. But I didn't know that there was denial there, and also I just didn't know that there was other ways to do things. Like it was just so obvious to me I couldn't see it. And so sometimes, like I've had moments where I had to have breakdowns, like you said, and sometimes when you have a breakdown, it breaks down that denial, and you kind of abandon, like I abandoned those old, even for just a period, abandon those old maladaptive coping strategies. And then that's like allows me to be open for the introduction of new coping skills.
You know, I'm wishing that we had allotted 3 hours for this show instead of just the half hour we have, because I think, you know, when I know about the two of you and myself, I think we all have such a vast experience, and I think it just kind of speaks volumes to what we're saying, is that everybody deals with a mental health issue in some way, shape, or form at some point in their lives. Some of us face it more regularly, more often than other people do. I know for me, I struggle with it off and on. My anxiety, I keep a daily log. I rate my anxiety on a scale of 1 to 5 because I'm trying to find patterns in what sets me off.
Yeah.
You know, and then I can recognize it now. Like I'll fall into depressions, you know, every month, every 2 months, you know, and some days, it gets really bad. You know, I have been, not in years, but had suicidal thoughts. I have been pretty upset about things that, you know, because when you work, and you know, and Lori, you know, with the work you do and the work you do, Joel, you see the worst parts of people's lives. You're there when people are at their worst, and it's hard not to carry that with you, you know, but just life in general is hard. We experience loss. We experience hardship. We experience heartbreak. And sometimes you just don't have that outlet to make it better. And like Lori said, or I don't know if it was Lori or Joel, but sometimes it just takes that one person to say, hey, I'm here for you. I care. You know, and for those that are out there listening, what I hope you take away from this is number one, that it's not a choice. And again, we're all speaking from experience. I don't want to feel this way. I know Lori and Joel don't want to feel this way. If you know somebody who's going through this, if you see somebody experiencing this, reach out to them. If you don't know what to say to them, reach out to us, and we can get you in touch with some resources. I know, when I was younger, I called 1-800-SUICIDE for a friend that, you know, texted me, said, I just took 100 pills, and I didn't know what to do. So call 911, call somebody, do something, and let them know that you did it, and let them know that you care. Don't be afraid to have that difficult conversation.
How much time do we got?
We got about
almost out.
4.5 minutes. Joel, why don't you interject?
I just wanted to say that, like, listening to this, like, to go back to what I was saying about Lori's point in observing individuals go through crises, that I think a lot of people have this idea about mental health that it's kind of separate, and they have this idea about coping strategies, and they think that's separate. So it's like some people have good mental health, so they're outside this conversation. And certainly we have to have labels in order to help people get diagnosed and possibly accept their own diagnoses. But I think, like, how to break out of just this discipline and break out of this box, so to speak, that I think all human beings go through distress, and all human beings form coping skills, so that this conversation can be for the mentally healthy, so to speak, as well.
Yes.
And the mentally healthy can teach us, because a lot of these things that what separates a person who's supposedly mentally healthy and a person who's not, they might just have done it without realizing it. They may have formed these coping skills kind of like subtly over time and just accepted them, and they've internalized them. And they have a wealth of information that they can share with us at how they get through their distress. So this isn't just reserved for, and also some of these people just keep this stuff in. And it's ironic that some people who have breakdowns are actually sometimes more fortunate, because that breakdown breaks them down in order to change their life, whereas other people suffer in silence, and they may not kill themselves, but they just suffer.
And that's sometimes, you know, that's an individual or a family, learn things. Sometimes that's just the cultural approach to
Absolutely.
dealing with life. And I was talking with Dennis a little bit about the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program and the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services here in the city. They have this great project going on called Porch Light, and it's a community health and wellness project where they're painting murals that help highlight the commonalities that we experience with mental health, and just a way to really just like you're saying, that kind of like peer teaching that we all affect how each other can grow and heal and change. And
got about 1 minute, Lori.
Okay, well, you can go on the Mural Arts website, muralarts.org, and check it out. But I just love things like this.
Muralarts.org?
Yes.
I'm writing that down
we'll link it up.
I'm gonna share it.
We'll link it up on our on our page, on our Changecast page also. We'll have links to everything. Lori, before I jump into my wrap up, do you have any final thoughts, any final words?
Just to remember that as people, we all go through these things, these horrible things. And your feelings are always right. Your feelings are never wrong.
Awesome.
And trust in them and each other.
I love that. Because I'm a feeler. I live life through my feelings, and that's a great point. Trust your feelings are never wrong. Lori, I love talking to you on the show. I'm confident we're going to have you on here several other times because this just was not enough time. And
no, it wasn't.
She does so much, for me personally, and behind the scenes with Service of Change. She's been such a great help. Going to drop this warning order right here on the horizon. I just received an email from Lori a little bit ago. She has gone through all the haikus she's been writing, and we're going to be publishing a book. Lori's haikus for change that she writes for us. So we're gonna put that in the publication, and there'll be more to come on that. Very excited about that because they're very inspirational. She's a very talented poet, very insightful. Again, please check us out, www.serviceofchange.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. That's the best way to stay connected with us. But also, again, follow me on Twitter, Dennis Nappy the second. That's Nappii. I'm sure Joel's going to be working on setting up his Twitter account, but if you want to reach out to Joel, it's joel@serviceofchange.com. If you want to just shoot me an email, dnappy, the number 2, @serviceofchange.com. Again, I'm Dennis Nappy the second, Joel Schaefer, and Lori Latimer for Service of Change, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. Be that change. Thank you.
The prisoner should say a word.
Service of